Hello, you wonderful folks out there in Dolphins land, all nervous about what this team is going to do in free agency and what they're shopping for in the draft. Today on Dolphins in Depth, I have a special guest for you. He's not really a special guest, he's a member of the podcast, but he's been going on a long hiatus for quite a while. It's the return of the Mac. Barry Jackson. Barry, welcome back to the Dolphins in Depth podcast. For those who do not know, Barry Jackson was babysitting Jimmy Butler for quite a long time. I do want to get your take on the trade because I said this to my best friend who's a major Miami Heat fan. And I know that the Golden State is not, high in seeding and they're hot right now. But I do believe they can win. They're one of those teams that can win a championship, especially if they get playoff Jimmy.
Yeah, they're close. I'd still favor OKC. I would favor Denver, but they're in the equation. It's good to be back with you. We will be doing at least one show a week, every week, the rest of the year. I've been doing Heat games in 8 different cities over the last month, so it's good to be back with you for free agency and the draft and the chaos of the next 6 weeks. And my question for you is, will Chris Grier get everything right? Are we going to be sitting here in July saying he aced everything? We have a team that can compete for the division title, or are we delusional if we think that?
I think you're delusional if you think that. You just got to go by the track record and the history. Usually mediocre grades in draft, usually big money spending free agency. Will trade for your big money player. You know what, Barry? Here is my thought process in this, and I love that you're here because you're a vet in the game. People don't know this, but I began my career at the Miami Herald as an intern, as your intern, Barry. Listen, there's this thought process that the Dolphins will act desperately during this 1 year and get it right, or you're all getting whacked season. Now, the reason I say that is because Steve Ross has said the status quo will not do. Now, only if you have a English problem do you not understand that he needs double-digit wins, if not a playoff win, a single playoff win. Am I not under the understanding that you have here?
Oh, absolutely. Right? I mean, everyone's job is at risk here, and that's why I don't think they're going to go on a wild spending spree like they did 4 years ago where they're throwing around hundreds of millions. But I think it's going to be more than last year where they were very selective with spending money. Jordan Brooks got the biggest contract of anyone. They tried to go entirely minimum contracts at guard. So I think we're going to be seeing something between what they did last season when they were cost conscious and what they did 4 years ago when they just went nuts. And I'm going to use one of your lines, which I love. I think it's time to max out Daddy's credit card. And I said this on Twitter yesterday, and I knew a lot of people would disagree because when you say that, people immediately think, well, you're mortgaging the future. They're not a very team anyway. But I don't look at it in those terms. I'm not recommending, Omar, that they start trading draft picks like the Rams did a few years ago. And I'm not recommending that they get themselves involved with older players at big long-term money. What I am recommending is that they maximize cap space to fill as many needs with quality established veterans in their mid-20s as they can, and
that's
just hope they hit on it. Well, I mean, it's easy to clear out $57 million cap space. We obviously saw the $14 million, close to 14, that Tehran created yesterday by being kind enough to go to the minimum while he mulls his future. You can create $24 million by asking Chubb to take a pay cut, restructuring him, restructuring Austin Jackson and Sealer without pay cuts for either. That's $24 million.
Nope.
Do it for 19. Right there. I would restructure Tua and get $19 million in immediate cap space. That's 3 starters, not 1, not 2, but 3 starters. And the reason I do that is the only downside is later this decade, you're adding $5 million to Tua's cap hit for 4 years later this decade if you create the $19 million now. That gives you $57 million in space. You have so many needs, Omar. I would max out the credit card, but I would do it wisely. I would do it on free agents in their prime who are off their rookie contracts, who can be here for years to come, and I wouldn't trade future draft picks.
But here's the thing, Barry. Here's the thing. You're putting out there free agents off their rookie deals like Jordan Brooks. They're not going to be cheap, Barry. You know that.
They're going to have to be astronomical immediately. And I know the concern is obviously you're going to have huge cap hits later, and you're going to keep having this problem. But I think not only because Grier and McDaniel need to save their job, but you need to salvage something out of the 7-year rebuild for your fan base. You can't just throw your hands up and say it's time for another rebuild. You have a 1 or 2 year window, right, where Tyreek will probably be on the team, where Jalen Ramsey's going to be on the team, and you have to do your best to maximize it. Maybe Josh Allen breaks a wrist, God forbid. Hopefully he doesn't, but maybe he does, and the AFC East is wide open. So to me, you have this 1 year window, and you need to make the best of it because your owner is 84, because you do have the ability to clear out cap space to address these 7 or 8 needs with quality veterans in their mid-20s, and because the owner and the GM are fighting for their job. Now, here's what bothers me. I want your take on this because I saw this yesterday on social media when I suggested they max out their credit card. You had a lot of Dolphins fans then saying, well, we're rooting against the team this year because we want Greer and McDaniel gone. To me, that's foolish because once Steve Ross makes a decision to bring back Chris Greer, what purpose does it serve to root against him? You then have to immediately root for him. It's like
I think that's 40% of the fan base. I think that's 40, and I think it's disgusting.
Exactly. It's like 2 candidates running in the same political party for president. And of course, this, is a different election this past year, but traditionally, you'll see the other candidates rally behind the one who wins. So you can be opposed to Chris Greer being here. You can say he should be fired. But once the decision was made to keep him by the owner, the only one who has a say in this, then you root for him and his success. I don't understand Dolphins fans saying, let's root for total unraveling in 2025.
Total disaster. And it's such a toxic mentality that I oddly, and you could speak to this, I don't see that with Heat fans. Don't act like you won that trade with Wiggins. Like, come on. You got, you did the best you could. Don't act like this team is good, but Heat fans are not rooting for ultimate disaster. Heat fans aren't saying, let this team be as bad as we possibly can be, so maybe we can get that Duke forward. Like, no. Why is it just Dolphin fans that basically hate their own team? And I get it. You haven't won anything since 2000. I get it. Dave Wanstead's probably been the best head coach you had since Don. I can't see this. I get myself in trouble. Since Jimmy Johnson. But you should not be rooting for this team's success. Here's my issue with what you said in terms of maximizing the credit card. I don't disagree with the thought process. You usually max out daddy's credit card every year. Why stop now? But let's put that over there. It's going to be hard for them to sell themselves to free agents because every agent knows the situation. What free agent is honestly going to come into a situation and say, let's say the Pittsburgh Steelers guard James Daniels, right. James Daniels, who is, for me, Barry, at the very top of my list of players that I want. Okay. I want a veteran presence, an established player, a guy who comes from a good franchise. He knows what a good culture, a healthy culture looks like. He's still young enough. I'm not paying ridiculous money, but I'm saying to him, hey, come here. The money's legit. We bid big. And if he's got 4 other teams that are interested, why would he choose the team with the head coach and the GM that's basically on a 1-year prove-it deal?
I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. No state income tax. You get to live in South Florida, which is very appealing for a lot of players. You get to play for a coach who is liked, and you get to play for the organization who 2 consecutive years has been rated #1 in the league in how they treat their players. So you and I think alike on a lot of things. I disagree with you vehemently on this. I think the Dolphins are still appealing. I don't think the fact that Chris Greer might be coaching for his GM.
South Florida is appealing.
I don't think that affects free agents.
South Florida is appealing.
They're going to come to Miami to play.
South Florida is appealing. Dolphins, I don't know.
It's still a relevant team in the sense that they're not coming to a 4-13 rebuilding project. They're still coming to a team that's, a team in the wild card mix that if they get lucky with injuries to the Bills, maybe they can compete for a division title. So to me, I would not be concerned about how appealing Miami is. I still think Miami is one of the 10 most appealing destinations in the league when you factor in that NFLPA survey that came out today. Players have high regard for how the Dolphins treat their players. Everything from the rooms where they rehab to the locker room to the dining area. That makes a difference to players. But you know what makes the most difference, even beyond that and the weather in South Florida? Money. if the guarantees are right and Steve Ross has always opened up his wallet,
Yeah.
they're going to get players. Now,
But if the numbers are the same, Barry, why should I choose them over the Carolina Panthers, even though I think Carolina's in a horrible situation?
Well, I think if the money's comparable, Miami's a lot more appealing because they're a lot closer than Carolina is, you would think, right?
Okay.
And also, the appeal of living in South Florida in November, December, rather than Charlotte, which is a lovely city. So I think I don't see Miami being in a position of disadvantage with getting free agents if they have a willingness to spend. And I think they will this offseason because they know they're all on a ticking time clock with their job on the line. Here's my question to you. We know they have 7 or 8 needs. They need 1 or 2 defensive linemen. We know they need an inside linebacker, whether it means re-signing Walker or Dotson or going outside. And I do think they're going to poke around outside. They need a starting cornerback. Obviously, they need 2 guards. And they need what other needs? There were 7.
Safety, come on. How do you forget safety? They need 2 of those.
Oh,
they need 4 of those.
Right. So we're 8 starters. So here's my question to you. How many do you leave for the second wave of free agency or the draft, as opposed to saying we're going to go out and find good starters at all 8 of these spots? What's the prudent approach in your mind with that? How many of the 8 do you fill first 3 or 4 days of free agency?
I mean, history of Chris Greer has been, and I address every position so that I can go into the draft and select the best available player. So whether it be the first, the third, the second, the third wave of free agency, I think that we will address everything, even though it's a long-ass list, Barry. It's a long list. I think we'll address everything to the point where we have a competent roster so that we can go into the draft and select the best 10 players. That's just not how they draft. They don't draft generally. Juwan James might be the one year where they draft, and I don't even think that was Greer. They like to go BPA. Now, for me in free agency, I would like them to knock off 4 starters, whether it be re-signing Anthony Walker or Isaiah Wynn. And I'm actually open to signing Isaiah Wynn and having him here and allowing him to rehab here for a full year. And I'm not expecting him to play 18 games, or 19 games, or actually 16 games. But I like the presence. I like the stability. And if a young player comes in here and beats him out, oh, great. If a young player isn't ready, then I can buy some time. But you go out there and you sign Anthony Walker, Isaiah Wynn, get me James Daniels, get me a defensive lineman. I am not very big on, when I look at this free agent class, and I've thoroughly combed through it, Barry, there's nothing I have to have. There's when you have teams out there salivating about Javon Holland because he's young and he's talented, and you might be able to make something of it, I'm throwing away Javon Holland. Give me a compensatory pick. I'd rather have that. I am actually in the thought process of looking at, I want to do what they did last year, which is guys who get waived. So I can, collect all my compensatory picks for guys that are defecting the team. Because Liam Eichenberg, let's say he goes and gets a decent deal. Great for you, Liam. Clap it up. Go everybody who wants to leave, everybody who doesn't want to be part of this culture. Javon, you want to go live in a loft in a city? Please, it was nice. It was nice knowing you. I appreciate you. Go get your money. I'm not dying to re-sign anybody, even Dotson. I mean, hey, I hope he gets a great deal because that would mean a great compensatory pick, Barry. Mm-hmm. I'm very curious what becomes available on the waiver wire. What guys get released? Because right now, Barry, I look at this free agent class, and anything that's decent is getting overpaid. Anything that's reasonable is injury prone or old. And it just doesn't do it for me.
Well, I think it has to do it for you because I think they need to fill more than 4 of their 8 starting needs early in free agency. You can't leave that much to chance. Now, I do know, obviously, that eventually, they're going to find someone who falls through the cracks who can be a functional starter. Last year, it worked out great with Calais Campbell, but to me, that's more the exception than the norm in terms of finding a high-impact starter in free agency in May or June. So my approach would be a little bit different from yours. I would clear out as much cap space as possible. I would try to fill 6 of the needs early in free agency.
For the next GM, right?
Yes. But again,
see, the admission there, I love the admission.
I'm not giving ridiculous contracts to guys in their 30s. I'm spending money on players who have an established body of work off their rookie contracts, who, yes, they're going to be costly. I'm not suggesting you spend $100 million on a guard like Carolina did with Rob Hunt, but there are a core of 5 or 6 players that can instantly fill needs for you that I think need to be filled in the first week of free agency. And that doesn't even include backup quarterback, which needs to be a priority with Mariota or whoever on day 1 or 2. So here's what I would do. I would sign at least 1 veteran guard. I would lean towards signing 2. I think everyone agrees that they need to sign a veteran guard in the first couple of days.
Tier 1, 1 tier 3.
If not James Daniels, Will Freeze, maybe Kevin Zeitler, although he's older. Trey Smith, obviously, has had a good year with Kansas City. Tevin Jenkins, Aaron Banks, Mekhi Becton, who the Eagles turned around. He was a failure as a tackle for the Jets.
No, I don't think he fits this scheme. I don't buy it. I'm not putting a 350-pound guy in South Florida.
Well, Jeff Stoutland was able to turn him around and make him a very effective guard here. Butch Barry could do the same. I see your point about the weather. Maybe it just is not a good fit from a weather and size standpoint for Becton. Now, I would be tempted to spend the money on 2 of those guys and not leave it to chance and not gamble that Isaiah Wynn's going to be healthy and not gamble that you're going to pick Tyler Booker, the Alabama guard, or someone at number 13.
That's what you want.
So I think a case could be made to spend on 2 guards early in free agency. And I'm going to tell you the other 2 non-negotiables for me. You have to address defensive tackle early in free agency. Unless Calais Campbell agrees to a deal in the next week, you need to sign someone from that group of B.J. Hill. Milton Williams from Philly, I know, is going to be expensive, but there are defensive tackles out there, and you need to get one of them, a high-impact guy like a Christian Wilkins, whether it's the guy from Detroit, Levi Onwuzurike.
We are so far apart.
Although he's had questions about his work.
We are so far apart, Barry.
Seattle, B.J. Hill from Cincinnati. You need to sign one of those frontline defensive tackles. So here's where I spend money first 48 hours, Omar. Backup quarterback, a necessity. At least 1 guard, James Daniels at the top of the list. I would lean toward 2 veteran guards, a frontline defensive tackle. Those, to me, are non-starters as far as things that must be addressed in the first 48 hours of free agency. Do not lose sight of the big picture. Everyone was saying this has to be a more physical team that pays attention to the trenches and can impose its will and win December, January games in cold weather. So the last time you want to forget that is the first 2 days of free agency. That has to be the mission. It has to be the North Star, as they say, where that is what needs to be addressed day 1 and 2 of free agency. 1 or 2 high-quality guards, at least 1 defensive tackle. I don't think they're going to spend big at nose tackle. And then I would say safety on day 2 or 3 just because you need a couple starters there. Jeremy Chin, Blackman from the Colts would be high on my list there. My order of things, do you agree with that, or do you think I'm missing something that needs to be higher?
I hear your line of thinking. I understand where you are. I cannot believe we have not talked this long because I think we are totally on polar opposite universes. I am addressing safety. I'm getting a veteran safety. I don't know who it is. To me, Justin Simmons, I'm sorry. I need it. I have to have it. He played in Atlanta last year. I'm sure he'd like to, upgrade his team. Even though, did Atlanta make playoffs? I can't remember.
No, and of course missed out with Penix came in late. He played well, but their defense wasn't very good. My concern with Justin Simmons is this, Omar. He creates turnovers, 11 interceptions over the past 3 years, including 2 for the Falcons this past season. Also had 106 passer rating as coverage area last year. He wasn't great last year. To me, the guys that I'm looking at, and I talked to Italian evaluator about this, the safeties that I would prioritize would be Jeremy Chin from Washington, who's had a good career, good young player, Justin Reed, Julian Blackman. Those are the names that have been given to me as guys who I've been told would be a good fit in the system. I'm not reporting the Dolphins are pursuing them, But to me, those guys make sense. Cam Bynum from Minnesota is another name. I agree with you that safety needs to be addressed. I would just say my first calls are to guards and defensive tackles. Then I get to safeties. Then I get to corners. The cornerback market is flooded with about 30 serviceable guys who are like Kendall Fuller. I think you're going to be able to get a corner Wednesday, Thursday of that week of free agency. But to me, you want to emerge from the first day of free agency with the best guards and defensive tackles that you can. To not address those in the first 48 hours would be malfeasance, in my opinion.
While I do agree with you, Barry, guards, especially guards, are 1,000 snap players. Safeties are 1,000 snap players. Defensive tackles are 500 snap player. And if Calais Campbell says he wants to come back, then that guy's a backup. I'm not pushing the issue. It's a priority for me that Calais comes back. I know that's totally on him. However, Calais, how does $5 million for this year sound to you? Let us set the baseline. Here's the thing. We get it. He's 37. He's played 17 years. He's chasing a ring. But the reality is, you know who he is and what he does. And there probably wasn't a more valuable player on your team than Calais Campbell last year. And if you're Mike McDaniel, you need that. You want that. It's the same reason you don't cut Teron Armstead. I can promise you right now, Mike McDaniel does not have a chance to survive without Teron Armstead or Calais Campbell. Unless you completely rebuild an entirely new team and an entirely new locker room, you know who your alpha male is in that locker room? Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill, and both of them can bite you at the turn when you turn your back on them. So you better make sure you have players in that locker room who can control and corral those dogs, because if you don't, you are going to be in trouble, and we're going to be looking at a Joe Philbin situation all over again where you might not survive 6 games. So to address, I didn't see the Teron Armstead. I'm going to take a minimum salary right now, and while I make my decision, and we'll address the situation later. There, in my mind, there had to be some sort of wink, wink promise that when we have our money in June 1st, we're going to take care of you, because I can promise you Teron Armstead ain't playing for $2 million. Like Teron Armstead, I've known veterans my whole life, and they put a certain dollar value amount on playing football at their high level. Teron might put $1 million into his body every season. He is not playing for a minimum salary. So there's probably a wink, wink, Barry, agreement that once we get that June 1st money, which there's only one way to get June 1st money. You know that, right, Barry?
I'm waiting till after.
Yeah. And it requires the release of a certain player who,
Chubb is who you're referring to. And for people who don't know, you're allowed to use 2 post-June 1st designations, which come with a lot more cap savings than they would with pre-June 1st designations. However, the money, as most of our listeners know, is not available to use until after June 1st. So it helps you fill out your draft class. It gives you a little war chest of money to be able to use for free agents who haven't signed in June and July, sort of those late free agents like Justin Simmons was last year, a guy who you mentioned.
Campbell, yeah.
Yeah, I think the area where we disagree is you would address safety every bit as soon and as quickly as I would address guard and defensive tackle. I prioritize defensive tackle more than you do, and you prioritize safety more than I do. Here are 2 positions where I wonder if we see common ground in. To you, does there need to be an urgency on day 1 of free agency to sign a frontline corner? There are about 30 guys out there who are decent, as we said. DJ Reed, Javarius Ward, Rasul Douglas, Carlton Davis, Sante Samuel Jr., Byron Murphy, Mike Hilton. There are guys like that who are better than Kendall Fuller or similar to Kendall Fuller. Do you make that a priority on day 1? And here's the other thing. Do you make inside linebacker a priority, or do you just say, we're okay with a combination of Anthony Walker and Tyrell Dotson again? We're just going to get by at that position. Dotson would probably have to get a little more than the minimum. Walker might be a minimum.
No, Dotson's going to get real money. What are you talking about?
He's going to get more than the minimum, but I don't know that anyone's going to pay him $8 million. He was
he's a 100 tackle player. 100 tackle player, 3 interceptions.
Yes, but a player also that Buffalo decided to move on from. This is no disrespect to Dotson. I've been an advocate of him. He played well here. But Seattle moved on from him in the middle of the season for a reason. So I don't think he's going to break the bank. He's going to get paid.
He still came here and as a backup played well, Barry.
Yes.
Maybe here's my issue with Dotson. And I don't know him because we haven't had the opportunity to see him in training camp. So I don't know if he can play or not. What I saw on the field, it was encouraging, but then sometimes it was a little inconsistent. What I don't like about Dobson mixed with Jordan Brooks is they're both weak side linebackers.
Great point.
Instinctively, are they really those run sniffing, I smell the run, go hunt it down, kill it? I don't really know about that. Now, I do know that Walker is. And Walker,
but health is the issue with them. I would say in the defense of Dotson and Brooks, I agree with you, but also both are high tackle volume guys. So I think that combination could work.
You make me a ton of 7-yard deep tackles. I don't want that.
Right. And I know you're looking for more tackles for loss and more Zach Thomas type impact. My question is, how quickly do you need to address inside linebacker and cornerback in free agency? To you, should those positions be alongside safety and guard? Or do you get to that later in the first week?
I am fine with what I'm doing with Walker. I'm going to go draft it high in the draft, and hopefully I have a young player who I can develop and not end up with a Channing Tindall. As far as cornerback, and this is going to be a controversial take, Barry, I can go get myself an age mature cornerback like Stephon Gilmore, who's still good, who's probably doesn't want to do camp. And here's the even more controversial one. Xavier Howard sat out football last year. We know Xavier can still play. We know his ego is probably a little bit more grand than it should be at this point. I'm sorry if he still wants to play, because Xavier's into horses right now, and I don't know if he's training, and I will check later. But Barry, if I offer Xavier $4 million, $5 million to come here and pair up with Jalen Ramsey again,
who in the slot, correct?
How bad would that be?
If Xavier's in shape, I would think he'd still be a decent option. I wouldn't see a downgrade over Fuller if Xavier hasn't lost a step, if he's not having knee issues, and if he's in shape. His last year for the Dolphins was not a terrible season. The down year was the year before, but his final year, his metrics were fine. He was still a competent NFL starter, in my view. I'm kind of with you on cornerback in this regard. I think that needs to be priority number 4 or 5. It shouldn't be a top 3 priority. To me, it's backup quarterback, guard, defensive tackle. Yes, I agree with you. Sign one safety. I wouldn't say it's the first thing you do in free agency. So to me, those are the clear-cut top 3.
I think safeties are going to go fast. And now it could be a market that gets reset. I think guard needs to be a market that gets reset because they get money. They get money, Barry.
If 2 days go by in free agency and the Dolphins are left without the 8 frontline starting guards, what's Chris Greer going to tell Steve Ross? I'm going to draft one. I'm suddenly going to find one in the 3rd round. I'm going to get one.
If the price for guards are $14 million, do you pay that just because that's the price?
I would for one of them. I would to get a frontline guard because it shows you're taking the owner's word seriously, and it shows that you realize you could not run the ball between the tackles last year. People need to understand, and I think 90% of the fan base does, and you certainly do, the inability to be able to impose a physical will on players between the tackles, except for Aaron Brewer for a lot of the year, doomed every aspect of their offense. Teams were able to play 2 safeties deep, not worry about being beaten by the Dolphins running game because they knew that their defensive tackles could overpower the Dolphins guards. So in order to set up the long passing game again and make that the component of this offense that it needs to be, you need to be able to overpower people in the running game. You need people movers. That's why guard needs to be number 1.
Barry, you set a price for a position. Just like when Christian Wilkins was paid $24 million for 3 years, a year for 3 years. You set a price for the position. If the inflation takes that price past the point that you want to pay, Barry, sometimes you just got to back out.
Not if your job is on the line, and not if it's as clear to even Helen Keller that this is their number one need, right?
I could go address it in the draft. I could go address it in the
James Daniels or Will Freeze or any of these offensive linemen $20 million a year. I don't know that's going to get to that level, but you have to be comfortable going into the teens.
I make my bids.
Guys,
I make my bids. I make them respectable, Barry. I do not overpay for a guard. You already know this organization, this individual, Chris Greer, Mike McDaniel, they do not put any value or priority on the guard position in terms of paying it, drafting it. So why would you spend ridiculous money on it?
The reason you have to spend ridiculous money is the reason I just told you. The offense cannot function without people movers who are able to help them succeed in running the ball, which thus reestablishes the deep passing game. And the other reason is you simply cannot count on finding quality guards in the third or fourth round. I did a study last year where I determined that the Dolphins have not had any long-term offensive line starters this century beyond the first 2 days of the draft. So rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7, they haven't found a single long-term starter this entire century.
Hold on. That was another regime. Past regimes, past coaches. That was past regimes, past coaches. One, on top of that, you're looking at it from the guard standpoint. Their history says the last guard that they drafted was Solomon Kinley in 2020. They don't draft guards. They draft tackles and convert them to guards. So I'm pretty confident that they can find a tackle in the first 3 rounds, convert him to guard. The adjustment might be a little bit, but you can go address it in the second or third round of free agency, just doubling and tripling down on. I'm not saying it's the right approach to do, but it's what I would do as opposed to paying James Daniels $14 million a year. And I'm not saying that that's going to be his price, but you know what the market does, Barry. At some position, it just drastically artificially inflates for a reason because teams have need. Trey Smith for Kansas City. They're talking about this guy making Rob Hunt money, and I'm not paying a guard $100 million. I just am not.
No, I draw the line somewhere, but to me, you have to be willing to pay 10 to 15 million to fill a need that you've shown
I'm at 14, Barry. That's my cap.
Draft, other than Rob Hunt. Obviously,
that's my cap, Barry.
14. With that.
That's my cap.
I'm going to use the line that men use with women and women use with men. I don't even know you anymore, Omar. All year I hear about that. Got to improve the trenches. I got to improve guard. And what I'm hearing from you is you want to wait till the draft to address this? Are you kidding me?
Listen, Barry, I didn't say I don't want to add a veteran free agent. I'm saying I'm going to bid on guards. I'm going to bid aggressively on guards, but I'm not going to pay guys ridiculous money. I'm not going to pay you pass rusher money or number 1 cornerback money for a guard, Barry. I love guards, but think about the history of this team and this organization. Justin Smiley, Jake Grove. Who was the one that Adam Gase rubbed in my face from Green Bay? You would remember his name. And then he lasted like one game.
Oh, Sitton. Josh Sitton.
Yes. Their history of free agent guards, Barry, has not been very good.
But their drafting of guards after day 2 of the draft has been even worse. Omar, you have the money. You can clear out $57 million. Spend the money on a guard. Make sure no one brings this up and brings us, put it on your, as we would joke, your permanent record in October when Tom Garfinkel and Steve Ross are addressing.
It's already on your permanent record, Barry. It's already on your permanent record. It cannot be removed.
Chris Greer cannot afford to have on his permanent record that he again went an entire offseason without signing an upper echelon veteran guard. To me, that is a no-brainer. And I see your point because there are pretty good interior linemen in the first round. Obviously, the Alabama kid, the Texas and Missouri kids who are both tackle and guards, Membu and Kelvin Banks. So there is a possibility of finding a starter round 1.
Barry.
But round 2 or 3, I would be queasy, Omar. I would be very queasy going into day 2 of the draft with only 1 starting guard on your roster. And you could tell me this. You could make the point to me, okay, sign James Daniels, someone like that, spend big money, and then leave the other guard spot open, but sign Isaiah Wynn to cover you.
Yes.
But here's why I disagree with that. I like Isaiah Wynn very much as a player and as a person, but the health history suggests that you can't have as plan B counting on Isaiah Wynn being your starter just because of durability issues.
Yes.
So I lean towards signing 2 quality guards in March And if you happen to be in position to sign another lineman or draft another lineman in the second or third round or fourth round who has versatility, who could also play tackle, I'd be open to it. But I don't want to be in a position where I'm entering the draft needing a starting guard. The position has been undervalued here, and I know it's a polarizing position. Some people think it's not important. The Dolphins traditionally have thought they could get by with minimum guys at guard, but that philosophy has to change because we saw evidence on the field last year how destructive it is.
Yes.
You have mediocre guard play.
Here's my point to you, Barry. There are about 9 offensive linemen. LSU's Will Camp, Alabama offensive guard Tyler Booker, Missouri's Armand Mambu, Texas's Kelvin Banks Jr., Ohio State's Josh Simmons, Ohio State's Davin Jackson, Oregon offensive tackle Josh, I don't even know how to say his name, something. Purdue's Marcus Mumboy, I don't even know how to say, North Dakota. And yes, you might end up with a Liam Eichenberg. You might. But in your top 2 picks, if you could walk away with a guard, and I know you don't want to leave anything at 13 to say I'm drafting for need, position of need. But when you look at how this draft stacks up, there are a lot of people who say there are not a lot of blue chip talents in this draft. Now, and then they use that as an excuse to say, oh, it's a bad draft because there aren't blue chip talent. One, if you don't see Cam Ward as a blue chip talent, you're blind. But let's put that somewhere else. That's for another podcast discussion. If you have half of these guards, 5 of these guards identified as blue chip talents, you're going to be in position to get one at 13. And you do that. You can go out there and you can get a James Daniels or somebody competent, comparable, not drastically overpay, but give him $20 million in guaranteed money. And if you can get a deal done, but maybe the market takes it way past your bidding point. My point to you, Barry, is I'm not being desperate. I'm not being thirsty. It's a priority, but you know what? I strike out on the first wave of guards that are being overpriced. I double down on the second wave. I go out there and I be real aggressive. I raise my bidding and I try to get space fillers. But I really do believe that you can make do with a top 2 pick. Maybe if Chris Greer's not selecting him, but I put somebody else in charge of selecting him. You know, Butch Barry, who do you want? Go get him. Go developing. It's on you. Now, does that make me feel comfortable? No, but it would make me feel less comfortable if you went out there and you paid ridiculous money for a guard and then he ends up being
Well, if it's a guard with a proven body of work who's been a people mover who fits the system, then you have to suck it up and pay him the 10 to 15 million a year, whatever it takes. So, yeah, I don't think we're going to see eye to eye on guard. I think they need 2 established starting guards signed in March, one at big money and then one at decent money. And I'm not leaving it to the first round of the draft or the second round of the draft. I don't want to be in a position with the first round where I have to take Tyler Booker or the Missouri guard Membu or Banks from Texas to fill that need. I want to be able to draft whoever the best player on the board is at that time, whether it's a pass rusher like Michael Williams from Georgia, Mike Green from Marshall, Shamor Stewart, the local kid from Texas A&M. If it's the cornerback, Will Johnson from Michigan. If it's an inside linebacker, Jihad Campbell from Alabama. There are defensive tackles in that range with Mason Graham and Walter Nolan of Mississippi.
That's another
I want to be able to take best available. You could throw Malachi Starks in there, even though there are stark differences, no pun intended, about whether he's a mid-first rounder or late first rounder.
There are.
So I want to sign 2 guards in March, one at high money, one at modest money, who's an established starter, and say, I don't want to have to worry about this, knowing that I'm going to have to use a first-round pick or second-round pick on a guard. I want that taken care of. To me, there are 3 positions where they should feel desperation, because you use the word desperation. Backup quarterback, guard, defensive tackle. You can't talk for months and months about how this team needs to be better in the trenches and then not be desperate at defensive tackle.
What are you paying for a backup quarterback, Barry? What are you paying for a backup quarterback?
I'm paying, the going range is $5 to $9 million a year for a Mariota or somebody like that. Some can go cheaper. Your guy, Joshua Dobbs, you could probably get a little cheaper. But if you have to go to $5 to $6 million a year, and there are usually another $2 or $3 million in guarantees, that's what you do. Andy Dalton got the 2-year, $8 million extension.
What are you giving Mariota? What are you giving Marcus Mariota?
Well, if the bidding goes much beyond 5 or 6, I would probably look elsewhere because he's not that good. He's a very serviceable, competent backup. He's probably the best for their system who's out there. But yeah, I'm clearly not going to go to 9 or 10 million for a backup quarterback. Last year, Brissett was what, 8 to 9 million, and of course, bringing him in to start initially ahead of Drake May, which he did. And we can get to this on next week's pod, but besides Mariota, what other names? And I know Josh Dobbs. You love Josh Dobbs.
I'm a Joshua Dobbs guy.
Mhm.
He knows the system. He's been in it last year. I'm 2 for 6 on Joshua Dobbs, and 4 million guaranteed money. And I don't want them to draft a quarterback, but there are a couple that I have my eye on in the draft. I don't feel like they've earned the right to draft a quarterback, and I know that quarterback is not going to win me games, but I'm not overpaying for a quarterback. I would rather put my money elsewhere. Just and Marcus Mariota, Joshua Dobbs. I'm even Jimmy Garoppolo. You act like Jimmy Garoppolo can't come here and win you games. I don't know what their issue is with him and Mike McDaniel, but
no, I'm fine with him. But I do think he could end up being the starter in LA if they move on from Stafford, which has been rumored. By the way, I know one of your men.
I mean, that's going to be Rodgers.
I know one of your man crushes a quarterback, Kyle McCord. Am I right? I'm with you on that one. Very accurate.
That's correct.
Yes. But don't leave that to the draft. You got to sign a veteran backup, whether it's
absolutely
right. Okay.
Absolutely.
We're on the same page.
I'm not opposed to 1 year, $2 million, $1 million guaranteed for Snoop Huntley.
I think you can't have him as your number 2. The Jets.
I didn't say he's my number 2. I'm just saying
number 3.
I'm just saying he's signed, Barry. That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
I would sign him as a placeholder and see, in worst case scenario, if I get, because remember, just like last year where they say they people outbid them. They weren't ready to go at the price points that other guys were going. Joshua Dobbs, you sign him as a free agent, or you sign Marcus Mariota as a free agent, that's going to mess with your compensatory pick formula there.
Right. I wouldn't start worrying about that when everyone was bemoaning last September how they hadn't addressed backup quarterback. To me, you need desperation at backup quarterback, guard, defensive tackle. I'm going to keep ramming home that point because you can't complain about those 3 things for months and months and then say, oh, you know what? We'll deal with it when we deal with it. If it goes into April, we'll deal with it then. You have to address it immediately in free agency. The areas where I find common ground with you are, you have won me over. I do think they do need to sign an upper echelon safety early in free agency. And with corner, I'm with you. I think they can be a little patient. Now, their history would suggest that they're going to sign a corner first 48 hours of free agency. And they found good value with Kendall Fuller last year. It didn't work out because of the concussions and because of knee injury late. But when he played, he was adequate. 94 passer rating again.
I don't want to
their history suggests they will address corner early because, as Chris Greer says, you can never have enough corners.
Yes.
Right?
That is true. And you can never have enough podcasts. More than likely, we will be back on Dolphins in Depth later this week. That is the infamous Barry Jackson. The Mac is back. And we will see you on Friday in Dolphins in Depth.